Welcome to the Indie Marketers Podcast. This is episode 7, and my name is Mike McFarland. How you doing? Thanks for listening. This week we have the founder of Social Cat Media, Kat Tapillo Murphy. Kat is a social media strategist. She runs her own social media agency or digital marketing agency around kind of where I live, in the same kind of vicinity, in the boonies and in the sticks, kind of in the middle of nowhere of kind of north central Ontario, I guess, northeastern Ontario, whatever we like to call it. Anywho, Kat is awesome. Definitely give her a follow on Instagram. We'll have contact information for Kat in the description of this podcast, as well as on the social media posts that are promoting this podcast. We're going to change up the format a little bit here. I'm actually going to drop off and we're going to jump right into the interview now. And at the end of the episode, we'll do a rehash of what we talked to Kat about. We'll talk a little bit about the music that we've got playing in this episode, as well as rhyme off how you can connect with me or connect with 3MG. So without further ado, Social Cat Media's Kat Tapillo Murphy. Kat Tapillo Murphy, welcome to the Indie Marketers Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
How's it going? How's your Friday going?
It's good. It's a snowy winter day, so I'm just working and staying warm and cozy.
And you're very rural, like we are here too. You're in Lakefields?
So technically we live in Lakefield, but we're about 15 minutes from the village of Lakefield. So we're out in the woods and rural.
Got it. And have you been there for a while?
No, we just finished 4 months here. So we're new.
Nice. And you were Peterborough previously?
Yes. So we lived in Peterborough for about 7 years and felt called for an even more rural, simple life. So we found ourselves up near Buckhorn in Lakefield, and we love it out here.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you very much for making the time for me today. I really appreciate it. For those that don't know, Kat is, I don't want to say like a social media manager per se, but you run your own social media agency and you help other companies, other small businesses run and use social to their benefit.
Yeah. So Social Cat Media is a social media agency. I recently updated my title. So of course I'm the CEO and founder, but I need a job title. So I am the head of strategy and memes.
Head of strategy and memes. Okay.
Very important to put that in there.
Yes. No, I'm definitely down with that. I'm a big meme and emoji guy in all of my communications, so I can very much appreciate that. How did you get started in this? Because social media itself, I was talking to a client this morning. It feels like social media is not that old, but maybe it doesn't feel that old, but it's also evolved a metric shit ton in the last few years.
Oh, totally. And for me, when I went to university, so I started university in 2012 and I was in a Bachelor of Creative Advertising course. So obviously everything advertising, and social media wasn't a thing we talked about, which is wild to think about. A decade ago, it wasn't brands were on social, these things were happening, but it wasn't a focus.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure in my first year of university, we had I took a social media course and it was this is what Twitter is. And can you write a tweet with 180 characters? So it was very much still learning the basics of how a business would use it. And I really just found it really interesting and felt kind of lost in terms of my program. The advertising agency life in Toronto wasn't who I am as a person. Obviously now I live in a tiny rural community, so wasn't vibing with that. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, whether this program was for me. So I just started playing around with social, did some internships, and then realized that's what I wanted to do with my life. So I just really focused on it.
It's funny you talk about kind of coming into social, and in 2012 it it was certainly prominent, but not as nearly as prominent as is today, where you have creators and you have businesses that run on Instagram and TikTok. I remember my CEO when I worked at a company called Eloqua, Brian Carden. This was around 2008 or 2009. He walked by my desk and saw me on Twitter and was asking, like, what are you doing? Why are you on Twitter at work? And I was talking to him about, like, we should be using Twitter to promote the things that we're doing as a company. And he kind of got it at first and then really started to get it. He became one of the most influential CMOs on Twitter for a while. But just that same mentality of, like, people not really understanding or not knowing kind of the value of it. It's certainly, like, I can't imagine a business without social media now. Is that kind of what you're seeing? Like, obviously you've built your business and your career around social media. Are you finding that a lot of businesses themselves are starting to think like, well, if I'm not there, there's a really big opportunity that I'm missing?
100%. I think sometimes we lose sight of that perspective in terms of how much social media has changed how we do business, especially as small business owners, where if 10 years ago you would have to be investing in a billboard or transit ads in your community or getting on the radio, and that obviously has costs associated with it. And I don't want to say this in a negative way, but sometimes we almost got it too good with social media, that it, when businesses were building on social, when it was really becoming a thing for brands, it was really easy to grow because we didn't have the competition. There wasn't as many people out there.
Right.
That's different now. So it's switching that narrative from it being like an easy, free, like, oh, I'll just post on social type thing for business, and really focusing on like the strategic part of it and figuring out like how are we talking to our audience. So just like you would get strategic making a radio ad in terms of what radio station you'd go on or where you're going to put your billboard or where you're going to do print ads, we need to really focus on that shift with social for sure too.
And I think that's one of the things I've personally started to really appreciate, especially watching Kim, my wife Kim, doing all the social work for 3MG. And I see all the stuff that you post, and I've like looked at your website and things like that. And it's planning. It's not just about, like, it's execution is always the easiest thing. Like, it's easy to hit the send button and let something go. But when you do something with purpose and you do it with a strategy behind it, it tends just to be that much more effective.
100%. And like, I'm really passionate about strategy and also intentionality when it comes to social media, because like, I'll be the first to admit there are negatives of social. And as this generation and this type of like business these days, like, we've built our businesses online. There's the expectation that we're always online, and there's negative aspects of that for mental health, like even just how we do our businesses, things like that. So it's really important that we have a strategy. We know why we're doing it. We're intentional about what we're posting and why. So that's not like a negative cycle of we're doing stuff, we're not seeing results, and we're spending more time and it's not having an impact. We want to make sure that we kind of take a step back and figure out that why and what we're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, kind of taking it back, I guess, to the start for you, when did you start, I guess, Social Cat Media?
So I started freelancing or like doing my own thing in university. So in my first year of university, the summer after, I did a communications internship in Ireland at a nonprofit, which was super cool. And again, like, made me realize that this is what I wanted to do. And then after my second year of university, I was like, I don't really want just like a regular summer job after having a cool experience my first summer. So I did the Ontario government summer company program, which gives funding and business mentorship and training for students who want to start their own business in the summer. So I did that, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to start my own business. What's it going to be? So I focused on social media training for small businesses in the Bay of Quinte region is where I'm from. So I did that. I worked a lot with nonprofits, and that was a really great experience. Really, was like, okay, there is a need. People need the training, the teaching. And then when I came into my fourth year, we had to do an internship as part of our program. And as I mentioned, I wasn't feeling the agency life.
Yep.
And it was not what I wanted to do. And so I was feeling very stuck on like, how do I complete this program? I put 4 years into it. How do I just get through it. And I'm a big sports fan. So I was actually listening to a sports podcast, and they had someone on from the Canadian Women's Hockey League, and they had an internship position opening for a social media manager. I said, okay, like this would be perfect. So in the fall of my fourth year of university, I started working at the Canadian Women's Hockey League as a social media manager, which led into a contract position. And then from there, kind of worked in the sports industry freelance for a few years before coming to Peterborough, kind of getting settled in what is a very strong, like, entrepreneurial small business community. And that's where I started kind of branching out from sports and really focusing on my love of small biz.
Makes sense. And it's funny you say that about Peterborough. I had Emma Scott, who I believe you know, on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And she said the same thing. Now, I mentioned on the podcast too that I'm from Markham and Peterborough, and my parents live in Peterborough now. And I've always had this not negative connotation of Peterborough, but Peterborough has always just kind of seemed like a little bit like a retirement community. It's a little bit older. That tends to be the demographic. I didn't realize there was such a creative spirit there.
Yeah, the arts and entrepreneurial community in Peterborough is really awesome. And what led me here. So my husband and I are both from Queenie West, and then I went to school in Toronto and he went to school in Peterborough. Toronto was not for me, and I spent a lot of time coming to visit him and stay with him in Peterborough. And it was a no-brainer for us that this is where we wanted to stay. And even if you just like look at downtown Peterborough, there's so many independent shops, so many small businesses. Like, the restaurant scene here is wild in terms of how many like independent restaurants there are. So it really is cool to see that community of supporting small business, of people doing their own things. And I think with our proximity to Toronto, there's a lot of people who have left Toronto who wanted more work-life balance. Yeah. And wanted to enjoy outside and be a part of like a vibrant community where you knew people but still have access to the arts and all those cool things you can get in the city.
Absolutely. Now you've talked a lot about small business. Is that typically who you work with?
Yeah, so our main focus is small business. Like, I love working with solo entrepreneurs, the people that have started their own business, sometimes as like a side thing and have grown it into their full-time gig. But we also work with larger brands that are Canada-wide, consumer packaged goods, some larger service-based businesses across Canada. So we do the full spectrum, but my love language is for sure supporting small business.
Got it. I guess with working with small businesses especially, do you find that it's a little bit different than working with like larger brands, larger companies, in terms of not the buy-in, but the process of like building a social media strategy and kind of finding your voice and all of that? Do you find it different between small business and, I don't want to say enterprise, but just bigger business?
Yeah, and I think, again, I'm very passionate about, I hate the word work-life balance because it doesn't exist, but like the idea of feeling comfortable in that flow between work and life. And as a small business owner, especially if they're, let's say, hiring us to do their social media strategy where they're going to be the ones implementing it, we have to be very cognizant that they are not a full-time content creator. So a lot of the information we see on social is like, post 3 times a day, or you need to post a reel every day. And that's not realistic for someone who is a parent and working 9 to 5, like working their business 9 to 4, and is doing everything from the accounting to the product development to like, it's not possible to have the same social media as a company that has a full-time social media manager working for them. So that's something that we really take into consideration working with small businesses, is how is it going to fit in their life and what is sustainable for them.
That makes a lot of that resonates with me. Just, I never did any social marketing. Since I started 3MG 2 years ago, and it's not that I didn't want to, it's just, it was time. Time was always the enemy, because if you want, like, I always wanted to do it properly, and it takes a lot of work to do it properly, which I never truly appreciated until I started thinking about, well, what does a social strategy look like for 3MG? I couldn't even come up with it. I've been just so thankful for Kim and so thankful for the strategies that you've been able to give to Kim for us, because it's just, I think what I'm starting to realize with the power of social, it's not just about getting content out there and like promoting your brand. It's really like, especially for small businesses like ours, it's a reflection of you. And that's, I think, really the coolest thing that I've really started to experience with social, is that you can have some personality with it. It doesn't need to be click on the link, this bit.ly link to download this white paper or this ebook. Like, it can be fun, it can be personable, it can be behind the scenes, it can really be whatever you want it to be. But I guess that really all depends on too, like what sort of audience you have. So I think, like, for folks who are getting started in social media, like, where do you tell people to start?
That's a big question. And it does really depend on the business and what their goals are, what their capacity is. But as you mentioned, like, that connection piece is so incredibly valuable. And I think that's something that a lot of business owners don't necessarily consider, is the reason social media was created was for people to connect with people. Like, that's why Facebook became a thing, right? That they wanted to stay in touch with other, like, university students. So at the end of the day, even though you're a business owner, you're still a human. Your customers, your clients are humans, and they want to connect with humans. So we need to make sure that there still is that humanity to what we do on social. And so when we're working like with a solo entrepreneur, obviously that's fairly easy because it's a one person like business where we can really incorporate who they are into that content. But even when we think of a larger business, it's focusing on that humanity. So the community base of who their audience is, like what their lives look like. So instead of just always thinking about like what's going on in our business, what do we want to sell, what's coming up for our business, it's really important to like flip the script to like, what is my audience going through right now? So like, If you're thinking January, like your audience might be in the winter blahs, and like where January feels like it's like a year long, and in February maybe they're like they need some motivation about getting outside. So really thinking about like who your audience is, how you can help them, and like what's going on in their lives, and then flipping it to include your business, how you provide value, but always got to think about the people. Like, we're all real people on social.
Yeah, and I I would love to actually get your point of view on this one. Like, from a social standpoint, in terms of platforms, the most time I spend on a platform is probably LinkedIn. That's where like my network is. That tends to be where I don't want to say, not my messages resonate the most, but that's where my, like, I feel like my audience is there. And we're growing an audience on Instagram, we're growing an audience on TikTok now. And one of the things that I constantly see, especially on LinkedIn, and it could just be the nature of my feed, everyone focusing on this idea of personal brands. Do you like that term? Do you think it's a term that works for folks? Do you think it's kind of blown out of proportion in terms of maybe how people use it?
I think there's so much value behind the idea of it. And I think the term personal brand can sometimes be used out of turn or like too much. Like it becomes almost like a fad or a trend. But the idea behind it is that, again, people are humans and you're human. And whenever we can add that humanity to a business or a brand, that's important. So like in my case, Social Cat Media is an agency. So people aren't necessarily always working directly with me, but I am the person behind the business. So it's my personality, my personal brand that's incorporated into the business. And the reason that's so important is like there's other social media people out there, but there's a reason someone's going to choose to work with your business versus someone else's. And you need to figure out what that is. And often that's because of your values or your personality, like the why of why the business was started. So like my website talks about, being an office fangirl and like uses vocabulary. Oh my goodness, vocabulary. It uses words that my audience, it's Friday afternoon. So my website uses words and phrases that my audience would recognize, that they've seen on social, that it's not trying to speak to everyone, because that's not going to make people feel compelled to work with us, because it has no personality, no connection. So by honing in on like what makes you different, that really creates power. So even if you are a larger business with multiple employees, figuring out like what the vibe of the company is and like the vibe of the employees, like, is it, fun and having the drink card on Fridays and things like that, figuring out like, hey, what is our why, what is how we work, and incorporating that into how you market yourself.
I like that. I like that a lot. I've struggled with, not the struggle is a big word. I keep going back and forth with the idea of personal branding. And I think I like the way that you said it. I think behind that word is all the good that you want to do. It's really your authentic self. And putting a word like personal brand on it kind of makes you feel like a product. Like that's the way that I look at it. And maybe we are a product in some way, shape, or form, but at the end of the day, we're also people. And being able to showcase your own personality through like your website or through the content that you post, that's the stuff that resonates with me. And that's and you said it too, like that's what's going to make people resonate with kind of who you are as a person, or the services that you're going to offer, or how you're going to work together. Like getting that kind of sneak peek into that really is really kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to storytelling. So if we think about when we're talking about our product or service, obviously we could just post about, this is the product I sell, this is what I do. But when we can tell a story, and that takes personality, humanity to tell those stories, it adds so much more value. And it's funny because I was on LinkedIn earlier today and I saw a post, and it was from a woman. I actually didn't click her profile, but I'd be curious to know if she's like a business owner or what she does. But it was a photo of her and her daughter in the car, and it said like, I don't do meetings past 5 o'clock, or no, dinner is at 5 p.m. And it was, so I don't do
saw that
meetings
post
past.
too.
Okay, yeah, it was
Yeah, I know
pretty, like, it
exactly
had
what you're
like
talking.
20,000
Yeah.
likes. It was pretty well performing. But the post breaks down that, her kids go to bed at 7, and so that means that she's done work at 4 or 4:30 at the latest, so that they can get supper on the table, do bedtime, do all these things. And that's the why. That was like that quote unquote balance of parenting and business ownership. That is so much more impactful versus someone saying, my agency works until 4 p.m. for work-life balance. You're like, okay, I respect that, but telling that story, putting into that context, like feeling those emotions, makes it so much more powerful. And like, I resonated with that post so much because we also eat dinner at 5 because our kids go to bed at 7,
Right.
and that's like a non-negotiable in our family in terms of our kids getting rest. So I also like finish work no later than 4:30, so that dinner, like my husband and I can get dinner on the table. We can do that family time, do those things, and get our kids in bed at 7.
That I 100% agree with that. The boundaries are certainly important, especially as a small business owner. Because one of the things, and I asked Emma this too, one of the things that I've in my career, not just running 3MG, I've struggled with is saying no. And as a new business owner, when you're growing, you don't want to say no to things because it's just, you feel fortunate that someone's maybe reached out to you. Maybe the money is good. I don't know. How do you find it hard to say no to people, or do you find it hard to, I guess, not play devil's advocate, but in the world that we're in with services, you do have to say no sometimes against your customers' will. How do you find that process?
It's definitely something I struggle with. Like, and I think almost every business owner probably struggles with that scarcity mindset instead of abundance, that, if we say no to something, then it's not, then that's it. And, what if tomorrow everyone ends contracts and things like that? So I think it's something that we always just need to keep reminding ourselves. I'm really working on that, because for me, the boundaries and that like work life flow is so important. So I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I really hate the saying the days are long but the years are short. I hate it. But I also recognize I have two small children that will not always be two small children. So that is something that's super important to me, to be there to get my daughter off the school bus and to take days off to go on field trips with her class, things like that. And recognizing that me saying yes to certain stuff is me saying no to those things. So that's been the biggest mindset shift for me, is recognizing if I'm saying yes to something, that means I'm saying no to something else.
Yep.
So there's times where saying yes to work stuff in order to say no to family things, or doing like making sure our laundry is under not wildly out of control, makes sense, where it's like this work thing is really lighting me up. There's other times where saying yes to family stuff means saying no to work stuff, and have to be okay with that constant imbalance.
Yep. No, I totally get it. What's been the most rewarding thing about running Social Cat Media?
I really love helping people. So like that really is my why. And so being able to see small business owners who are feeling like frustrated or overwhelmed or confused, and then they walk away feeling confident and their business is growing and there's that positive impact in those small local communities, that's the biggest reward. And the thing I love the most is seeing that impact and like increasing the positivity around social media, because there is so much negativity in terms of even like being a business owner. We get frustrated about how things are performing. So really trying to stay realistic with my clients and create those sustainable strategies that feel good. That's like my biggest mission, is for social media to feel good. Like we're not doing things that we hate. We're not feeling like we need to follow some random person on the internet who's telling us to do X, Y, and Z in order to be successful. Like we get to define success. We get to figure out what works for our business and then run with that.
I really like that. And I'm gonna hold on to that, because that's, I think, such an important saying. That, like, you're right, there is a lot of negativity with social media. There's a lot of negative stuff in the world in general, everywhere. But when you can use social media, not even, I don't want to say use social media, when social media can enhance what you're doing, when it can bring positivity to things, it's a really cool tool that way. And you see a lot of good on social media too. You hear some really good feel good stories about how people have connected and things like that. Now, do you focus just strictly on social media? Are there other channels that you focus on as well?
So we focus on social. We also do blogging as a add-on service. So we do everything from consulting, so like one-on-one power hours, to full-on strategy development, to managing clients' social media platform from like start to finish.
Got it. And is there, I guess, in the perfect world, if there was one of those things you could focus on, what would it be?
I love all aspects of it for different reasons. My favorite thing for sure is the strategy development. So whether that's working one-on-one with clients in like a power hour consultation, or presenting a client with a strategy, I really, really love that. And it's for exactly the reason we just talked about, is giving them the power back. So not them feeling under control by social media. It's like giving them the control back and knowing, okay, this is how we're going to use it. This is how it's going to work in your life. And this is how it's going to make it not feel gross.
Yeah. Not feel gross.
Yeah.
Is there one specific, or are there specific social media platforms you like working on more than others? Because I think for me, they're all mechanisms to get content out, but I know that the way you interact with them all is very different. Like TikTok has blown up in the last couple of years, and I've only ever thought of it as like people dancing and then on to the next thing, which I know it's a lot more than that. There's a lot of great how-to stuff and things like that. But from a platform perspective, is there one that you like working on the most?
Yeah, so we're an Instagram first agency, and it really comes down to our ethos, the company, for community building. So the ability to build community on Instagram is really strong. So if you think about like Instagram versus TikTok, like TikTok has great opportunities on it too. We have less of that, like that community based, just in how it works and how people interact with the platform. It is a lot more of like a passive platform where people, we're scrolling through videos, where Instagram has a bit more of an opportunity to build those connections. So that's our main focus as an agency. I am starting to play around with some more. So like being more active on LinkedIn and on TikTok and things like that. But for sure, our main focus. And in terms of how our clients work, Instagram is our bread and butter, our main focus. It is a really great stepping stone for businesses to get established on social, so they can have a great presence on Instagram without having to do videos and things like that. So a lot of times people say, okay, someone told me I should be on TikTok. But when we talk through the strategy of what that involves, is okay, like we'll guide you through, we'll coach you through these videos. We're like, oh, actually, I don't want to be doing, I don't want to be. And Instagram allows you to build community and make really powerful connections without necessarily, being on video every day.
Makes sense. Yeah, I guess with Instagram, you've got posts, you've got reels, you've got stories, you have these different types of media that you can use, versus TikTok is primarily all video. And the only thing I've heard about TikTok is apparently their algorithm is ridiculously like sound.
It's the amazing thing about TikTok is that it's a lot more, the discoverability of content is a lot easier. So on Instagram knows who you are very well. They know what you've engaged with in the past. They know, and they have a really good sense of what you like. And it kind of stays in a pretty tight tunnel of like, okay, you engage with this type of content, we'll show you something kind of similar. Where TikTok kind of broadens that a whole lot more. So you get something you didn't necessarily even know you liked yet. And then they'll show you a video. You're like, oh, actually, I love watching. One time I got into this like rabbit hole on TikTok of someone like fixing carpets. Like he was like a carpet surgeon, like he'd go in and he'd just fix it. And it was like mind blowing. Obviously not some like content I would ever seek out, and not something that Instagram would probably ever show me. So right. TikTok kind of like expands upon what you engage with to give you even more unique stuff.
Makes sense. What do you enjoy about entrepreneurship?
So much. I really like doing my own thing and having the creativity of like every day being different, that I get to choose for the most part, like what I'm going to focus on at a given time. I love, especially now that as a parent, like I have additional flexibility and the opportunity to like, I've always worked from home. So it's always been something that's like that work-life flow has always been important to me. And that I get to like build a business and my kids get to see me doing it. And it's really cool.
That is really cool. And I think 100% agree with all that. Like I watch having our daughter see Kim and I do stuff for 3MG, and like she hears stories of like daddy dressing up like the Macho Man and putting a video up on TikTok, or just like seeing Kim work in our living room on like building posts or building plans for stuff. And it's cool that she gets to see that like, hey, this is how mommy and daddy work, and this is how we work together, and which is it's really rewarding that way. Do you find, have you ever worked, I don't want to say in a corporate environment, but like in the more like non-entrepreneurial environment, not non-entrepreneurial, I'm gonna say corporate environment, like yeah. Have you worked in a corporate environment in the past?
So definitely when I was like first started off in freelance, the sports industry would be more corporate in terms of like I was contracted out, but there was structures and executive directors and things like that. And I did have one corporate non-social media position when I was just starting my business, like straight out of university. And I didn't enjoy it. And that was kind of like a big push for me to do my own thing. So I love a lot of people I worked with. I enjoyed the work I was doing, but there was a few things that were like sticking points for me. And I have had some like tragedies in my life that have really made me realize that like nothing in life is guaranteed.
Yep.
And you might as well like do the thing that you want to do. So when I quit my corporate job, I think I had like $500 a month in contracts. Like nothing I could live on. Thankfully, I had like a partner with a stable job. Um, and the day after I quit my job, one of my contracts called me and said, I think like we basically need you almost full time for the next month to handle a project. And so it was one of those things that was like really meant to be. That was a really good sign that like, okay, we're doing it.
Yep. It's funny how that kind of happens. I had the same thing happen to me. I came out of a pretty shitty situation from a job and was sitting with Kim, and we had always talked about me consulting on my own at some point. And she was just like, why is now not the time? Like, what do you have to lose?
Why not now?
Why not now? Like, you're in no worse situation if you don't do it. And kind of like you, like within the first month, I got my first client. And then it's just, you kind of snowball from there. And it's like, okay, this is actually feels real. This feel like this can be a thing. And that's so wild that it was the first time in my career where I felt like I had complete control of my own destiny.
It's
And
really powerful.
it's hugely powerful. It's, I have no regrets with companies I've worked for in the past. I've met great people. I've learned a shit ton. It's been great. But there's just something that's very rewarding when you get to go and you do it yourself, and you can kind of pat yourself on the back and say like, hey, I'm actually doing the thing that I didn't think was possible.
It's so amazing. And I, funnily enough, like grew up not thinking entrepreneurship was in my path, even though like me and my friends were always like making businesses and selling car, like doing all the things. But I always wanted to be a teacher. That was like my goal. My mom's a teacher, and so that's kind of like the lifestyle and that ethos is kind of ingrained in me at like from a young age. But then I really fell in love like art and design. So in university, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this thing. And even then, it never occurred to me that I would ever do my own thing. And it really is like the perfect blend of all the things I enjoy doing. And I love that like that teaching aspect is still in there. And I get to make my own terms of my life, which I think is so powerful.
How do you, we mentioned at the beginning of the episode that so much has changed in social in the last few years. How do you stay on top of it? How do you follow the trends? How do you find new trends that are like emerging?
I spend a lot of time on social media. um, that's like I think an occupational hazard of the job is I have to be very cognizant of like my time online because I follow industry leaders. I'm engaged in those like educational pieces. I'm in the process right now of doing like a year-long social media like a master strategist training. So I'm always learning and like wanting to stay on top of things, but part of it is just being on the platforms and having a feel of how people are feeling and what are they doing. So I need to be really always careful about how much time I'm spending online. So it's like a really hard balance to reach.
That's fair. It's, yeah, we tell our kids and we tell our partners, our husbands, wives, whoever, that like you don't want to sit on your phone for 8 hours a day. You kind of have to, or not just your phone, but I mean, but I'm sorry, I don't want to say you have to, but there's a lot of, I can see that just you've got to have those boundaries and those time limits for yourself so that you don't feel like you're fully immersed into this completely other world.
Yeah, like you could spend the whole day just scrolling and not doing any work, and there would be benefits you would pick up in terms of learnings, but then you haven't done any work. So it's a really important to stay tuned in, stay in check with what's going on, but also take a step back so that you can frame things from your own point of view. Because if we're like spending all our time online, we're going to get really caught up in what other people are doing, and we're like, I should be doing what that person is doing, and that's not necessarily the case. Like what's going to work for your business or for you is going to look a lot different.
I feel like, and I don't know if I used this term earlier, but like imposter syndrome. Like
Mm,
I had that's something that I really struggle with personally. I see, and I just for backstory for you, like I was on Instagram personally up until I think 2016 or 17, and Facebook, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Because I feel like all I'm seeing is you want to see the best of people, but it's not reality. It's like, that like just because someone posts like this amazing birthday party or this amazing vacation, yes, that's great. But it always seems to, for lack, it always seems to be positive. And I know that like there is negatives, and I just never found that it was authentic or real.
yeah. And I think we're thankfully slowly like pushing through that. But I always use the example of like my motherhood experiences for social media. So when I had my daughter in 2017, the only thing you saw online about parenthood, motherhood was like picture perfect, curated
Yep.
nurseries, babies sleeping, moms doing whatever they wanted while their baby slept, and life was great. I had my daughter, and that was not my experience.
Yep.
So I had major, like, what the heck am I doing wrong? Like, what's wrong with my baby? What's wrong with me? And even now, flash forward 4 years later, when I had my son in 2021, the conversations are so much different, which is so needed. Like, there's a lot more of the reality of motherhood. And I think if we compare that to business, we're also starting to see that. Before, everything on Instagram was like curated flat lays of like beautiful products and things like that. And now we're seeing more photos of people, of like real life stories, people talking about their struggles. And that's something I'm a huge advocate of in my own business, is like talking about the hard times. Like, it's not all sunshine and roses over here. And I'm trying to be really real because I know my audience is struggling with that. People I know are struggling with that. So I want to make sure that's not something that's just hidden behind closed doors.
Absolutely. You talked a lot about being, or you're seeing more of like the personality and the people behind the brands or behind the companies now in social more than ever. What do you think are some of the big trends going into 2023 that folks should follow or that folks should pay attention to?
And coming into that, like showing people in social. So we're still pushing back from that like overly curated. So behind the scenes, like raw content is really on the rise. And one of the biggest tips I give business owners is to just start filming aspects of their day. So whether it's working in a computer, or you're packaging your products, or you're working like in a brainstorm meeting on a whiteboard, set up a phone, hit record, and just have that video content, because that can be used in so many different platforms and different media forms. So like whether it's an Instagram story, or you're making a TikTok, and you can use that video and add a time lapse to it, and add some trending music and maybe a quote or some kind of update on it for your audience. That is really valuable to have that behind the scenes content. And people, again, we want to see people on social. We want to feel connected to brands, even if it is like a giant corporation. If we can see the marketing, like the marketing team brainstorming the next ad, like those are things that really draw people in, and definitely something that businesses of all stages and sizes should focus on and look into in 2023.
Do you think the pandemic kind of changed that shift a bit? Because
I think so, because again, like it's always been humans want to connect with humans. Then we look at everyone being thrown into a lockdown. We lost that, even just like day to day, seeing someone at the grocery store, that we really extra craved. Okay, if I only can talk to people through my screen, I want them to be real people.
yeah, I I think I'm just kind of putting two and two together now. I'm not saying that they're definitely correlated, but I would say in the last couple of years for sure, and we've said this before, but you're seeing that more authentic, the more personality, the more behind the scenes of people's lives. Like it's not just the best of the best anymore. It's like you're seeing parents talk about having hard times with their kids, or hardships with layoffs, like especially in tech right now. Like I don't know if you're seeing it as much, but tech is getting hit hard with layoffs now. And you're seeing that more raw emotion come out where it's just like, okay, like this is nice. Like it's not nice to see the hardships by
Yeah.
any stretch, but it's nice to feel that it's nice to see that people are feeling more comfortable and empowered to put their authentic thoughts out, not just what is going to get the most likes or the most clicks or the most visibility.
And the piece of that that's actually really powerful or maybe a little bit surprising is that often those posts get the most engagement. So it's not necessarily trying to use them as like engagement bait, but recognizing that people care. Like for me, I've talked about my struggles with like postpartum mental health after both my kiddos. And I had a meeting with a client whose kids are grown up, like adults. And she mentioned to me how much she appreciated my post because no one talked about it. She struggled too, and no one talked about it when she had her kids. So it's things like that that like build such powerful connections. And so there's like the hardship or talking about that realness is so crucial. But then even just like humanizing brands is also something that you'll continue to see more and more. Like if we think about TikTok specifically, there's so many brands that have an employee who is like the persona of the brand that like, Duolingo, or it'll be like a drink company and their social media person is the face of the company, which gets into a lot of questions in terms of their like as an employee, how much does it make sense that you're the face of a brand? And like if your social media manager leaves, and there's a whole like lot of questions that arises. But if we think about like how businesses are leveraging that, it is letting a social media manager be the face of a multinational company. So
Yep.
it's really interesting to see that push that, yeah, there's hundreds of maybe thousands of employees, and you have one or a couple social media people that are the brand and recognizable as that brand on social media.
It's wild. That's wild for me only because I'm seeing like I see the complete opposite of I see a different conversation, especially happening on LinkedIn, where with all the layoffs that are happening, people just saying like you are not the company.
Yeah.
Like companies can get rid of you just like that. And when I say the company, it's obviously it's C-level executives or people making
Yeah.
decisions on boards and stuff like that. But there's this kind of, I don't want to say uprising, but I'm getting this feeling that people are starting to realize that your work should be meaningful. You should be what you want it to be. And it just because you're not drinking the Kool-Aid of the company that you work for, or you're not posting like pictures of you and their swag and stuff like that, doesn't mean you care any less about them. It just means that like, hey, sometimes a job can just be a job and that's okay. So to hear like, but I totally get there's that other side where you have these like brands. I don't know if I just immediately think of like Nike or Coca-Cola or like KFC or whatever. You have these one or two social media managers that bring life to this logo or that bring life to this phrase. That's got to be weird. And I can
It's
see
super
that where
weird.
there's that weird balance between like who you are and who you're looked at as being as.
And like for me, I am the cat of social cat media, so it makes 100% that I am, the one showing up on video and things like that. But when we think about those larger corporations, and something like I'm currently working on with some of my CPG clients is okay, like this, if we're going to do TikTok, this is how it needs to be done in order for it to be successful. But it's not me. I'm not going to be the person in the video. So it's figuring out who makes sense in the organization, providing them with the training, the tools, and doing the strategy and the implementation of it. But there needs to be a face of an organization. But then you get into the danger zone of like, what happens if that person leaves and
Yep.
goes to a competitor or like anything like that? So it is really interesting times in social media.
I'm going to do a really big diversion here. What are you listening to these days? I'm a big music fan. We always talk about music on the podcast. Are you a music fan? Are there certain things that are like playing on your Apple or Music or Spotify daily right now?
Well, I love music,
Awesome.
but I am the least like musically talented. I love to sing and dance and just enjoy music, but like have no, I'm not like, I'm not deep when it comes to my music, if that
That's
makes sense.
okay. That's okay.
So right now, I mean, always, it's always Taylor Swift. Like always. So Taylor Swift's new album, Midnights, is unreal. So that's always on repeat. And then because I do have a 4-year-old, I'm actually really loving the Frozen 1 and 2 soundtracks right now. Like there's a few times I come into the office and I'm like tempted to put it on, like even though it's just me. Like the music is so good. So that's what I'm listening to right now.
That's awesome. And it's funny, I had the co-founders of Emmy Collective, another agency, on last week, and we talked a lot about Taylor Swift and just the debacle with Ticketmaster and the concert and or her concert tour.
Oh, I know. I wanted to get tickets. I was willing to like put a mortgage payment onto Taylor Swift tickets,
but she seems to have the Midas touch. Whenever she drops new music, everyone listens.
and for me, it's really interesting, like as a business owner and someone who works in marketing, she's also like a just her brand is amazing. And the way she's been able to evolve her brand and build that community of people who, feel like they know her, and it's really powerful to see. Like, and when she started speaking out again, like about her beliefs and politics and things like that, knowing that that would ostracize herself from some communities, but knowing like that's she needed to say those things. And like as a business owner, there's things that like I feel very strongly about that I need to say. And I just look up to her in terms of her brand, her marketing, and then I just think she's the best.
That's awesome. And that's great. And I'm a big heavy metal rock music guy. And the teenage version of me would have been like the metal, not a metal elitist, but like there was no other music if it wasn't heavy metal.
Right.
Now I'm not, like, I'm embracing all music, and I don't listen to Taylor Swift on a daily basis. I 100% respect and appreciate what she's done. And to go from a teenage country singer to being one of the biggest pop stars in the world is a pretty incredible journey. And I watched her documentary. Was it on Netflix?
Yeah, Miss Americana.
Was really good.
So good.
Really good. So I can appreciate how much you love Taylor Swift, and I can appreciate how everyone
like,
loves Taylor Swift.
For me, like she first came out when I think I was in grade 9. So those like cheesy country like breakup songs, I was belting them out in the school bathroom. And then it's like been this evolution of her brand as I've grown up. So it's really cool for me to have this person that's like to been with me through my life. And like, yeah, it's just I always relate to her music, and it always is like the perfect background noise when I'm working.
It's almost, when you put it that way, it's almost like you've grown up together.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. And
yeah.
I feel that with, like, there's a lot of bands that I feel the same way with that are still around now, like Foo Fighters, Metallica. I'll name those as just a few, but they've been around in my musical atmosphere since I can remember. And it's cool to see, like, as you grow up, you can have different appreciations for their older music, but a new appreciation for their newer music too.
For sure.
Even if it's different than their old stuff and it doesn't sound the same and all that. But anyway, I love it. And Frozen, hey, Frozen holds true. I'm sorry. It's a great Frozen 1 and 2 soundtracks. Awesome.
So good. Like I really want to get a bumper sticker made that's like, don't worry, we're listening to Frozen or something like that. Cause like me and my daughter were like arms up, like walking just out, doing the whole like Broadway performance of it, like blasting it in the car, and I love it.
Beautiful. I love that. Listen, Kat, I really appreciate all the time you've made for me this week. Thank you so much. how can people reach out to you? I'll make sure to have details when we promote this on social and in our podcast description. How can people get a hold of you?
So as I mentioned, I spend too much time on social media. So you can definitely connect with me on Instagram at Social Cat Media, and that's cat with a K. And then we're also online at socialcatmedia.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I learned a lot, and I will continue to learn a lot as I follow you on social. So thank you for teaching. Thank you for being your authentic self. Just thank you for being you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me today. It's been so fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much to Kat for joining me this week. Definitely an awesome conversation. Social media, I think it's something that I've always had a lot of interest in, but I've never known how to use it professionally, I guess is the best way to say it. I think we all use social media in one way, shape, or form personally, whether it be Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or Reddit or TikTok or whatever, even LinkedIn. But I think the ability to use it as a channel is something that has just I've never spent a lot of time learning about. And Kat makes it sound so doable. And I think that has to do a lot with her own knowledge and her own experience in the field, but also just the way that she articulates it back to folks. She's brilliant, and really fortunate that she took time out of her day to come and talk to me today. So thank you, Kat. Really, really, really appreciate it. Like I mentioned on the episode, we're going to have all of Kat's contact information available to you in the description of this podcast, as well as any sort of social promotions that we are doing as well. So if you do need a social media strategist, if you do need help getting your social media strategy off the ground, definitely go and seek out Kat. She is absolutely amazing. Let's talk about the music this week. So this week, change of pace, if you maybe noticed a little bit. Not the guitar driven kind of rock music that I've been playing over the last few episodes, going more into that kind of chill vibey side of things. This is the music I listen to when I'm in what Heather Faye has introduced to me, deep work. And that's usually what, now mind you, I work in my office now, but when I used to work in an office, I would always have my headphones on when I was in deep work, and that was my time to kind of just put my head down and get or nerd out with a marketing automation platform, nerd out with a little bit of like light HTML or JavaScript or jQuery code and things like that, just to help kind of get you in the zone. And that's when I really kind of discovered lo-fi. I don't think lo-fi is the right way to categorize it. That's the way that Spotify categorizes it. But I guess it's kind of like house music. It's kind of like acid jazz music. It's just easy, chill listening, and it's really nice to listen to when you are in that kind of deep work state. So what we've played today is one of those artists that I kind of group into that lo-fi chill music vibing scene, or whatever it would be called. Lost Midas. Now, Lost Midas was introduced to me through a show, actually, that I was really, really, really into, and it was on House of Lies. And if you've never seen House of Lies, it's got Don Cheadle in it. Kristen Bell is in it. There's a few other folks as well. It's about management consulting. Haha, pretty funny that a consultant watches a show about consulting. Outside of the show just being a lot over the top about what it's like to be consulting, but maybe some of the stuff's not actually over the top, but just having that kind of personal connection to it. I always really enjoyed the show, and the acting on it is absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, Lost Midas was an artist that was featured on that show, specifically the song that brought us into the episode, Love Undone. Great jam. Great, great, great jam. And the song that is going to take you out of this episode, and the song that you heard before I started talking, is called Dream Kiss. Again, another kind of just chill, a little bit of pounding on the bass, not a slap of the bass, but a little bit of a pounding on the bass. But nevertheless, great artist, great DJ, great producer. Really love his music. Check him out, Lost Midas. He's got a ton of music available on Spotify. I know that for sure. So definitely go and give Lost Midas a listen. Before we wrap up today's episode, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the socials. You can follow me on LinkedIn at Mike McFarland. You can follow the company, Mike McFarland Marketing Group, 3MG, on LinkedIn. You can also follow us on TikTok. Yes, you can follow us on TikTok at 3mg.ca. You can definitely follow us on Instagram at 3mg.ca. I had a lot of fun this week. On Wednesday, I believe, it was opposite day. So instead of my wife, Kim, being the one who normally runs our socials, she handed over the keys to the Instagram account to me, and I got to post some fun stuff during the day, a lot of which were stories, so a lot of which is gone now. But I had a lot of fun doing it. So I think I'm definitely I'm gonna try to participate more on Instagram. So if you haven't already, definitely give us a follow at 3mg.ca. Preemptively, I am asking you to subscribe to me on YouTube. A little bit of a, not spoiler, but a little bit of an update, I guess is the best way to say it. The first episode of Mike Versus is done. It is ready. It is ready to be introduced to the world. So, in preparation of that, if you want to get aligned to the posting schedule that I will have on YouTube, you can follow me on YouTube at 3md-ca. Or you can just search for 3MG or Mike Versus, or however you want to try to find me on the YouTubes. Really fun episode this week. Thank you again for listening. Thank you to everyone that has continued to listen. And thank you for everyone for providing feedback. A lot of the changes that you saw in this week's episode came from feedback that I was getting from folks. So I welcome any and all feedback, constructive, positive, negative. Just the fact that people give a shit is pretty incredible. So thank you for everyone who has shared their feedback. Thank you for everyone who has wanted to help make this podcast better. So hopefully you like this new format. I think it flows a little bit better. It gives me a little bit more time to ramble. It gives you guys a little bit more time to listen to why you're here, to these incredible guests that I'm very fortunate to have. So hopefully this works out. Well, let me know in the comments, or let me know over LinkedIn, or feel free to reach out to me. You can follow, again, we talked about the socials earlier. You can follow me on LinkedIn and message me there. So thank you again for listening this week, and we will see you on the flip side. Deuces.